And I'm Carol Pilkington. I'm a spiritual counselor and teacher, and I work with people that are in high anxiety, depression, and going through grief and loss. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Claudia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Claudia Rocafort, and I am a spiritual coach. I'm a business coach and also a spiritual facilitator. And I am thrilled to be here with my Mavens sisters for this conversation Joanna's going to guide us on today, and looking forward to it. Take it on, Kathy.
Take it on. All right. I'm Kathy Basel, and I am I do energy healing, and I'm a transformational life coach. I work primarily with women because I believe consciousness is rising, and it's time for us to offload all those old emotions, the blocks, the karmic things, inherited, ancestral, all that kind of baggage that's been weighing us down far too long. I call my company the Vitality Code. It's all about having full vitality in all areas of your life. So that's me in a nutshell, and I can't wait to hear Joanna's conversation that she's teeing up for us today. So take it away, my friend.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. And I thank my Mystic Maven sisters for changing their schedule so we can be here today together. I love when we gather together. It's always a great time and great conversation. So I'm Joanna White. I'm a spiritual, holistic, intuitive teacher. And what I like to teach is all about you. So the name of my business is You Factor Wellness, is because I had to learn how to factor myself in. I knew about everybody else and what everyone else needed except myself. And this journey of self-awareness started over a decade ago. And it started with someone asking me the question, what makes you happy? And I couldn't answer. I didn't know. I didn't know what made me happy. After being married for almost 15 years, I believe at that time, having 2 children and working a job for over 15 years that I really didn't love, I was like, none of this really makes me happy. What actually makes me happy? Who are you, Joanna? It just led to a series of questions that I always say, when you ask the questions, the answers will appear. So one of the answers that appeared along this journey for me was the 4 agreements. I started with reading that book, and not only reading it, but I started a group where we would read it together. Along my journey, I have learned that I'm a woman who loves to learn. I stay on a path of continuous education. So along that path, I had studied the Bible. I had studied the body in different ways, phlebotomy and nursing, and just how things came together for me always led me to me. So when I came across the 4 agreements, I just wanted to share it, because the biggest question for me was, who are you? And a lot of women, a lot of people ask that question. And some people are used to being told who they are. And that's what I realized. I was told who I was. Joanna, you speak a lot. Joanna, you talk too much. Joanna, people will tell you anything. Oh, Joanna, you're very loud. Oh, Joanna, you're this. Oh, Joanna, you're that. So a lot of times we have an outside perception of who we are. And what I learned is we start agreeing to it. And when the 4 agreements came to me, I realized I have a choice on what I agree to. And the truth is, I'm not a loudmouth, but I do speak my points very loud. I can speak my points loud. I can be loud. But sometimes we make agreements within ourselves that do not serve us. And I learned this along the way. You learn, what have I agreed to? One of the things I agreed to was being married. I loved being married. It was a joy for me to make my husband happy, to make the kids happy. But what I realized I was agreeing to at that time was making everyone else happy. So I had to go within. Going within is not always an easy journey, is what I'll say. And also learning that this journey, I'm causing it myself, really. I'm the one that's making the agreements.
Mhm.
So that's not always good to feel or hear either, that I've decided for this to happen in my life. I decided for someone to tell me, I know what it takes to make you happy, but I just choose not to do it. I would never decide to hear those words. I would never agree to hearing those words. At least that's what I thought. So now I started reading the 4 agreements. The first agreement, be impeccable with your word. Now, going to school for Bible study, for all of these things, you hear so much how the word is so important. We were taught it's a double-edged sword. It can heal and it could kill and it could do, but I never understood what that really meant. And now I had to pay attention to what that really meant. When we speak, are we speaking against ourselves or are we speaking for ourselves? So when you're being impeccable with your word, what are you really saying? What are you saying to others? And what are you saying to yourself? I had to start questioning that. I had to start paying attention to that, especially if you're telling me I'm creating this myself. So how am I creating this? A lot of times we don't take ownership. It is so much easier to say, no, not me. I didn't create this. And then I had to look back on some of the things that I was saying to myself, some of the things that I still say to myself. That's part of the journey of learning me, is these agreements. And the agreements start with your words, with the words that you are speaking. It's telling you what you are agreeing to. It really is. What are you agreeing to in your life? What are you agreeing to in your relationships, in your business? One of the things I had to sit back and say or look at was, how did I agree to this? And it usually is in our words. One of the things that I've done along the journey is writing, journaling. And even looking back on what I was writing, I realized what I was agreeing to. When we are in a constant state of asking and needing and wanting, it's putting us in a place of not being happy. We are at a place where we're looking for something other than what's in that moment. What am I grateful for? What am I happy for? And I had to look back at the words that I was saying and writing and doing. And I realized those words wasn't lining up with me and what I really wanted to see. It was more of everyone else and everything else. I began to realize how I was, what they call in the 4 agreements, domesticated into what I was told to be, who I was told to be. Being married, you can't have kids out of wedlock. So when I found out I was pregnant, I got married at 22 years old because that was what I was supposed to do. Was it what I wanted to do or needed to do for me? I didn't know at 22. I'm pregnant. You're not supposed to have a child out of wedlock. And you don't want to be a baby mother, so you got to get married. I planned a wedding in 3 months and I was married. Is that what served me? I didn't know. I didn't know if that, at that time, yes, it felt like that's what I was supposed to do. That was the agreement that I made. But the agreement was also made off of the beliefs that I was taught. It was what everybody else said it was supposed to be, and not necessarily what I wanted or needed for me at the time. So I just want to ask, have any of you ever made an agreement?
No. Yeah, I would say my biggest one was also my marriage. I was 28, and that was the time I'd been dating this really nice guy. He was professional, you know, on paper I looked perfect, and it was time. So yep, that was the way. But I like how you said that other people are telling us, and we're the ones that are agreeing with it. We're not recognizing the words that we're saying to ourselves. We haven't even taken the time to assess that. And I think that's the biggest gift that we can give ourselves, is looking at the results that you have in your life right now. What are the words that you're telling yourself? If there's something that you're striving towards that we're not achieving, and I'm doing this self inventory for myself right now, it's like, oh wait, I've been working hard towards this thing, so, and it's not manifested yet, so there must be something within. And I love, like you said, you found that you're really someone who loves personal growth. So I think anytime we go within, to me, it's an adventure. It's something fun that I get to discover some other old creepy thing that I've tucked away somewhere, and bring it out to the light, and it can be gone easily. So it doesn't have to be so big and scary, but I do think it's essential to living an extraordinary life. If that's what everyone we're achieving, we're striving to become more and more of our beautiful, unique selves, then it does require going in and just assessing what parts am I agreeing to that serve me, and let go of the rest. Awesome. Great conversation, Joanna.
Yeah, it really is. We come in, my experiences is that we come in predisposed to these agreements because of the environment that we're living in, the culture that we're living in. And, you know, there are some beliefs out there that we come in knowing what we agreed to beforehand. That's not, I say it's a belief because I don't know it directly. I haven't experienced that directly. I don't remember coming in agreeing to these things, right? But I have heard many people that have had not only near-death experiences, but spontaneous out-of-body experiences where they conferred or communed with the outer world, where they saw that they came in with these agreements, knowing. But when we come in, it's like our memories are erased, right? Of what might have transpired before this incarnation. And I think that's so that we can learn new lessons. And so with regards to this particular agreement, what I take away from it is that whatever I say or do to another, I'm also doing to myself. And so when I make that real, then I can make better choices for myself. And when I make myself real, I make other more real. And so the conversations, the words that I use, the actions that I take become more intentional and more conscious.
And that you just hit on the most powerful aspect of it, is that making it more conscious, right? For us to be able to evolve and grow, it starts there. It starts looking within. It starts looking in the mirror. That's where the change can happen. That's the place of power. And that's where we can say, okay, how am I showing up? And I want to bring a very down-to-earth real example for anybody listening, because that's part of what our mission is, right? Is how to bring and apply all these tools in our day-to-day lives. For me, the biggest example was in my childhood, my mother and I moved from Spain to Venezuela, but my father remained in Spain. And it was really tough for me as a little girl, wishing and hoping for daddy to come. And for several years, he was there every 3 months and I'd see him regularly, but something shifted, his finances, whatever happened, that shifted and different, but he'd still promise that he'd show up. And he'd say he'd be there for my birthday, and March would roll around and he wouldn't make it. And he said he'd be there for summer, and summer would show up and it'd roll around and he wouldn't make it. 6 years of this, unfortunately. What does that do to a little girl, right? There, you can create all these stories about abandonment, about not being worthy, about not being loved enough, all these things. And it's all, there's no, I understand now, he wanted to be there. He was hoping he could be there, but he didn't realize the damage or the pain that when that date came around and him not being there caused, right? So that integrity, that's the level of integrity. It starts with what we believe. It starts with, like Joanna was saying, the conditioning. We're conditioned by our church. We're conditioned by our religion. We're conditioned by our schools. We're conditioned by the countries that we were grown up in. The communities shape us in our beliefs and what our values become. Our homes, our parents. Sometimes we don't even question. Do we have prejudices? Do we even question why our parents believed what they believed and why each generation before may have held those, right? So it starts with that question. How do I want to show up in the world? Who do I want to be? And how can I show up in integrity? How can I walk my talk? Whatever I say, can I take responsibility for it 100%? Can I question my beliefs and see, you know what, they don't serve me. Just because I was taught this as a kid, or I was taught this at church, or I was taught this at school, I don't agree with it, or I don't want to agree with it, right? Where do we get to claim ourselves and rebuild our inner values? And how do we get to show up on those to everybody else?
And that's it, is building yourself. Number one, what are your inner values? A lot of times our inner values are based off of what we're taught, of the beliefs we're taught. A value would be to be married and to, you know, some people value that, but it's what I was taught to do. Once you fall in love, it's the natural response of what's supposed to happen. And just learning, did it serve me at the time? Absolutely. Like I said, I didn't have an issue with being married. Would I have gotten married so young? And I don't want anybody to misconstrue that. But for everyone, the timing may have been different for me, or it may have been something different if I didn't look at what everybody else was telling me I should do. And that's when you kind of pull it back into yourself. A lot of times, like even with my kids, being able to pull away and allow them to make the decisions on their own, because it's not my belief. And I have a son that lets me know, Ma, that's the way you were taught. That's not how it is anymore. So I'm grateful for him, because he speaks his mind and he knows that it doesn't serve him. Does it always feel good? No, it doesn't.
That's the challenge of raising kids, right? They get to be great master teachers and mirrors for us. And it's
Absolutely.
not always easy. I want to jump in here for a moment, because that is such a powerful example for me, and to how much I wanted to make that different for myself with my kid, and say, I won't make promises I can't keep. If I'm promising something, I better show up. And if I can't, the minute that I realize that I can't, I'm going to turn around and explain to him why I can't and make a new agreement. So this is how we evolve. To me, this is evolution, right? Is we're going to make plenty of mistakes, but let's not make the same ones, ideally, that were made with us.
And that's the key. We can't not make mistakes.
The other thing I wanted to say too is that it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to question the norms and the embedded programming that we have, to say, I don't know if this is right for me anymore.
Mhm.
Because we can be ostracized by the community that we're in. We can be, turned away. In my life, this happened to me. My grandmother literally disowned me for a time because of her belief systems. And I had no idea that she had felt a particular way. And I didn't find this out until another member of my family told her about what my intentions were. I was coming home from California to New York to visit for the holidays, and I was going to be bringing somebody, or I was wanting to bring somebody with me that I didn't know that she didn't approve of. But they told her that that was a possibility. I hadn't made the decision yet. But from that moment on, for a good 4 years, I never saw my grandmother. She totally cut me out. And it wasn't until her son, my uncle, said, you can't continue to do this, and brought us back together again. But so it takes courage to go against the grain of the people that we care about and the communities that we're in.
That's true. That's
Even
so
the
true.
family nucleus, like you were saying, the immediate family can so disapprove that people sometimes go without communicating for years. And so why do we do that to each other? Right?
And it's mostly our beliefs. It's cultural beliefs, religious beliefs. There's a lot of beliefs that causes separation. And that was one of the things, because like Carol said, when you become courageous enough to realize that this belief is no longer serving me, that's the first thing you feel is separation. Because a lot of times you're alienated, people don't talk to you. And that's what a lot of people fear, is that separation. The fear of not being included. Everyone wants to be included. Everyone wants to be wanted. Nobody wants to feel like they're not part of something. That's why you have sports. That's why you have so many things, fan-based things, because people just want to feel a part of something. So when you feel like your family will disown you, for me, it was big because the church, when I decided that this was not serving me, it was really hard to make that decision to leave. It was really hard to stand up and get up and say, you're not going to be doing this anymore. It was what was ingrained in me. It was what, until this day, a lot of people still don't talk to me because of that move over 15 years ago that were very dear to me. And being able to realize that it didn't serve me was a very, I didn't look at it as being courageous. It just looked at as how much more will I hurt myself? It didn't become about anyone else anymore. It was, I'm hurting. And a lot of times we look at this journey of self-awareness, it usually comes from a place of pain. You're looking for a way to be happy, a way to just feel And I mean feel life, feel joy, feel peace. There's a feeling that is almost void, and you're looking just for that void to be filled. And a lot of times we hear the same things, and I go back because my history, my foundation is the church. So being in that for so many years, studying it, thinking this was my path, and to be told that is not your path. And I mean, to hear that voice clearly say, it's not your path, is almost scary. It was very scary, because now everything I knew was being changed. And I'm talking from marriage, from church, from family. Everything changed. And I had to realize, okay, what's the code of conduct you need for your life? This is the code everybody told you. And I mean, down to my job. Me and my mother were both conductors for Long Island Railroad. Why did I do that? Because I saw that it served the purpose for my family, as my mother took care of us, then it'll serve the purpose for my children as well. So even the path I took as my career was what I saw someone else do. And that's why I think one of the biggest things for me is freedom, is to be free to be who I am. So as I learn and as I move forward, I'm learning the beliefs. And okay, is this belief serving me? That's one of the things, if nothing else, we get today, like these agreements that we make in life. Are they serving you? Questioning who you are. Being able to say, you know what? I don't really enjoy doing this. This is not something I really like. Matter of fact, I don't even like how that made me feel. And being able to know that is a very empowering place to be. It's because a lot of times people don't even realize that they're just following a path. And I'm getting away from.
Well, but I don't think so. There's a fellow, David Brooks, wrote a book. It's called The Second Mountain. And to me, I love this because the first mountain, he says, is us finding success on the way we think that society requires it from us. And the second mountain is us discovering the mountain that's true to ourselves. So I think it's just like a rite of initiation, if you will, trying on that mountain. Does that work for me? And in a way, sometimes the best clarity comes from that contrast of like this, that, and the other thing doesn't work for us. I think those oaths, the words that we say to ourselves, talking about being impeccable with our words, those words might be things that we vowed or made oaths to ourselves, a promise that we made to ourselves in reaction to the hurt. Like Claudia, my childhood was rife with divorce and lots of pain surrounding that, as my dad started his second family before cutting off with the first one. So there was a lot of conflicting messages. So my vow to myself was that I would never get divorced because I didn't want to inflict that amount of pain on other people. And so I was living in that vow, not realizing till, like you said, slowly my soul was dying, until the one day, like I felt like I couldn't breathe and I couldn't identify why. There wasn't outwardly, everything looked fine, but there's that just lack. I like your word, void. There was a void that just didn't feel like the aliveness that my soul was really calling for. And that was the beginning of my rebirth, my trek to my second mountain. And it's funny because you said, we buy into what other people are telling us. Literally, one of the crazy thoughts that after I was getting, it was looking like the divorce was finalizing, I was like, wow, now who's going to tell me what to think? Because I had my sister, Patty, thanks, who as a child always told me. Then I got married and he was telling me what to think. And now I'm like, oh, wait a second. I get to do that now. So I think we get to that joyful place, and it can be scary because it's like, well, I don't know what to tell myself now. It's like, uh-oh, now what? And that's and just know that this can be a joyful journey. It's scary, yes, and that too can be part of the illusion that we create for this next part of life.
And it's interesting. I mean, ideally, we want to make these choices consciously and effortlessly and joyfully, right? Just by sitting in the question of, why do I believe this? And looking. Otherwise, life kind of throws an invitation our way that we may not choose, right? So, for example, I had a car accident when I was 18 years old, and I've mentioned this before. That made me question everything. It made me question why I was here. What was the purpose of my life? What was reality? Why had I survived? It made me question religion. It made me question all my values. It made me question every religion. So I went into this fervor of trying to understand all the religions, all the beliefs. Why were our differences? What were our separations? What's the purpose of it all? And that started this path that brings me here today. But it's been a lifelong love lesson, I guess.
Oh, I love that.
Love lesson. I do like that.
And my master teacher used to always say, Claudia, at the end of the day are you willing to love yourself more today? That question, does it serve you, is really about, am I willing to love myself more today and release whatever does not serve me or does not serve the community, humanity at large? Can we look not just inside, but also at everything and everyone and the connectedness and the oneness and what we would like for the world to look like? That integrity, that's how we get to show up, integrity with our words. To me, that's the mission, I guess.
Yeah, and to include in that, anywhere we're blaming or judging ourselves for who or what we've done up until now, going against yourself is a sin. That's not being impeccable with your word. That's off target. So let that stuff go. But gosh, even the judgment has been passed down as a way of being and thinking and deciding and choosing. It's like, wow, it was a big awareness that the moment when I realized that was my parents' way of deciding, if you will, and it didn't have to be mine. It was very liberating.
Wow. Absolutely. And it's self-inflicted pain is what it actually is. And we do it not even knowing that we're doing it, and that's the, I guess the unfortunate part is that a lot of people don't realize that that's what's happening. And I'm grateful to be on the journey of awareness where we do know it's happening, where you can say, am I making this agreement with myself? Really? Is this what you're saying? You're not smart enough. You're not good enough. You're not thin enough. These are agreements that actually run through our heads. And it's just that simple. Your hair is not long enough. It's not pretty enough. It's not soft enough. Just simple thoughts like that are agreements that we decide to make with ourselves. And being impeccable with the word is number one, I'm more than enough. So we can eliminate all that other self-chatter by just saying, I am more than enough. And that's being impeccable with my word. So when you decide the words that you're speaking, one of the things to be aware of, is it for me? Is it making me a better person? Meaning, do I feel better about myself? Because if it's something that's talking against that, it's not the truth of who you are. Knowing who you are is the real journey. And knowing that you're a force to be reckoned with. You are a force like the sun and the stars. We are all one. This body that you're in is your universe, and you speak to it. Every cell, every organ, every tissue, every joint is part of your universe. And when it's not moving the way that it should be or is designed to be, and that's in just total greatness, everything about you is great. And anything that talks against that is not serving us. So when you don't know if something's serving you or not serving you, if it's not contributing to your greatness, it does not serve you. knowing that if your words are not speaking greatness to you or anyone else, it's not serving. Gossiping, cussing, all of these things are things that don't serve us. Do we do it? It comes along the journey. And it's being aware, you know what, this conversation isn't serving me right now. It's not serving anyone. Whatever that may be, knowing that your words are now creating, they're creating everything for you. So when they say be impeccable with your word, it's because, not because, just because, it's because how powerful that word is. And that word itself is creating or destroying. Which one? You choose one every day. Every time you speak to yourself, every time you speak to someone else, you're choosing. Am I creating a better version of me? Or am I tearing down the version that's here? Our words that we choose. And I am going to tell you, I am very strategic with the words that I use. And I know that when I'm hurt, I can use words very good to hurt someone else. I've learned that about myself. And a lot of times that can't be taken back. So when you choose your words, choose them very carefully and truly be impeccable with them. Because now what happens is we go into hurting people with our words. And what the next agreement that I want to talk about is not taking anything personally. So sometimes people say things to you unbeknownst to what they're really saying. They don't realize that it's hurting. And I'm one of those people that have done it. And I can say something and not even realize that it hurt a person. And I wouldn't say I just wasn't aware, is what I'll say. But being aware and being more impeccable with my words, I had to also realize I can't take anything personally. That's why I'm spewing out the words that I'm spewing, is because I'm taking this personally now. Why shouldn't we take things personally? Because nothing is about us. They're not doing this to intentionally hurt you, or Joanna, that's not happening because of something you did. This is what this person is going through at this time, at this moment, at this time in their life. And you just happen to be the character that's here along in their movie. And sometimes we don't know the roles that people have signed up for. I didn't even realize the role of who I was sometimes. You know, you show up and you go, I'm a wife today, I'm a conductor tomorrow, I'm a mother right now, I'm a minister at the church, every role comes different. And sometimes when people come and they talk to you, or they don't know that I'm still in mommy role right now, and meanwhile I should be in conductor role, but I just found out that whatever's going on, and then you show up on the job and somebody says something to you and you're like, you got to be kidding me. What's just happened here? But I'm assuming, they're assuming. We begin assuming, and now it becomes an argument or a fight, and I'm taking something personally. This has happened to me over the years of having to work with the public and work with people, is that sometimes you take things personally. And one of the big things I would say along this journey was during my time at work, you'll get a commuter that'll come on the train, they'll have their cup of coffee, they'll have everything, and they don't have no money to buy a ticket. You knew you was getting on this train. What are you talking about? That's real easy for me to take personally now, because now my job is in question. Because now how do I handle you? You know, so now it becomes a battle that you didn't even realize that you were having for the day, or whatever it might be, because now I have to play this role and you have to play that role. But when we learn not to take it personally, you know what? he didn't know what conductor he was going to get on this train. It wasn't targeted at me. This was just his lack of preparation, or, like, you just have to understand sometimes this has nothing to do with me. And that's one of the biggest, I want to say, battles that I had was with my job and taking things personally there. That's the one that I could target in the most, because a lot of times these people aren't even thinking about me. They don't know who they're getting when they're getting on this train. They don't know. This is just who they are. That's it. It has nothing to do with me. So learning that a lot of times when we're dealing with other people, and just keeping your perspective. My perspective is to have a good day, to get home safe, to be happy. That's the only perspective that I can hold. And once you're holding your perspective, normally all that other stuff lines right up for you. And when that person comes, and I don't take it personal, what just happened to them, because they are moving off of what just happened to them. And we sometimes don't even know what that may be. And now it becomes a battle that didn't need to be. Sometimes bowing out gracefully and just simply saying, you know what, have a nice day. Because that's what I want to have today, is a nice day. So just let them have a nice day and keep going, Have you ever taken anything personally, ladies?
Sorry, I think that's the biggest challenge. I mean, of all the agreements, that was definitely the biggest challenge. In my family, we would sometimes use very hurtful words. I learned to fight back. And it's difficult when people you love are saying horrible things to each other. How do you not take that personally? How do you not take it personally when it's your spouse or your boyfriend or your mother or your sister or your lover, right? How could they say something about you that you feel is such a misperception?
Mm.
So that's the biggest challenge for me where disagreement is concerned is, okay, how do we do that? And it's taken a lot of practice and many, many, many years of, and I'm still not quite there, but working on it. It's a work in progress. Let's put it that way, right?
Absolutely.
As we all are in different ways. To be able to say that's their limitation or their limiting belief, or the fact that they don't know how to see it from another perspective, or the fact that this is questioning their value and they're making a judgment about yours. So again, it's not necessarily about me, but it's about their beliefs, their values, their stance, their position, their expectations, their needs, desires, or ego, right? And when I can take that step back and notice that and say, okay, just allow for all the perspectives, for all the opinions, and for all the ways of being, let go and let live, and we can agree to disagree.
I think that's so this is one of the agreements that really has impacted me the most as well. Because when I was able to take a step back and examine and see how someone closest to me operated in life with everybody, then I could see that what this person did or said and the way they did or said anything was not personal to me, that's how they were with every other person in their lives. And so when I could actually see that, it was truly a revelation, so that I never again took anything that this person said to me or did personally. It's just their way of operating. And when we can begin to see that for the people closest to us, we can begin to see that for the people that are around us that are in our sphere of, or our field of our worlds. And we can apply that accordingly, because we all have our own reality tunnel and we all see things with our own lenses and we operate from that place. And when we can make that as real as possible, we don't tend to get as triggered and go down the rabbit hole of that trigger as much. We can begin to eliminate the triggers, in fact, and just accept and see people where they are and make the decisions for ourselves, whether we want to be, involved with that situation or that person anymore. We get to choose. The moment we have that impartial ability to observe and see things from a distance, we have choice. It's like you can't see the wall if you're up against the wall, right? And so that has been one of the biggest lessons in my life with regards to the personal, impersonal set.
Yeah, that's why I love that term that you have, the reality tunnel, because it's really just a matter of perspective. Like, other people haven't experienced the things that we have, so their perspective is by nature going to be different than ours. So you got to go back and watch our last episode on resolving conflict. That was a deep conversation as well. For me, I learned this actually early on. I think I may have shared this story before. When I was 8, I had a dachshund and I was running across the street. He got hit by a truck. And when I went out to pick him up, he had broken his back. His back was broken, so he was in extreme pain. When I went to pick him up, he bit me. And as an 8-year-old, I didn't understand, don't take things personally. And my mom came running out to help and explain. I'm like, he bit me. Like, why would he bite me? My beloved dog. And my mom explained, he's in pain. And so I began from an early time recognizing that hurt people. And so, just like Claudia was saying, that we don't need to rise up and meet them at that level of hurt to exchange negative words. It's just recognizing, allowing them to be on their path where they are, and recognizing in our reality tunnel, that doesn't matter. It's not going to impact me where I am, because I'm choosing, like Joanna was saying, I'm choosing to have a good day. So I'm not going to take somebody's spilt coffee morning to be my bad day. So, or other people's pressure at work, somebody else's lack of preparation doesn't make an emergency on my standpoint either. So once again, it's just a beautiful way of offloading so much of the stuff that we may be taking on personally. We're carrying it over time, many, layers up over time. How many times as we look back, have you taken on stuff that honestly just wasn't your battle to fight, or wasn't your concern or your bad day to bear? So if we could take a breath and allow all those just to release, how much more space there is for us to choose that good day for ourselves. It's pretty potent.
It really is. It really is. I still on that journey of not taking.
Oh, it's the human journey. I don't think till the day we die that we'll have that one licked.
And that's the key. Even though you learn something, that's my son taught me, do you practice it? So practicing every day to not take, like, just being aware of these agreements and knowing and practicing. So sometimes things come up and you'll be like, am I taking this personally right now? Is a good question, because sometimes we get in our feelings with what people do to us. And Kathy made a very good point. Hurt people. So sometimes understanding where a person is coming from, if you want to, or just knowing, okay, that may have hurt me right now, but where might they be to do that? Like they might be really hurting right now. And that leads to returning the energy of sympathy or something to encourage them at that point, instead of, like Claudia said, meeting them where they are. Sometimes we could meet them with a little love and graciousness, or just because they're coming a certain way doesn't mean that it's personal to us, they're actually calling out for help. They're calling out for a little love or affection. And sometimes meeting them back with that energy can really solve a lot of the problems and the issues that we have with taking things personally. Like just knowing that that attack sometimes is not there for us to attack back, really. That's what it's not to go in attack mode. It's now to now give that love that we have to this person, or show them a little love, even just saying, you know what, have a nice day. Sometimes people aren't prepared for that when they're nasty to you. So when you say, you know what, have a nice day. Like, oh. And that's just giving them the love and not taking what they did to you personally. The third agreement.
Wait a second, I think we're running short
We
on
are.
time, and I really don't want to cut this conversation short. So what I
Right.
would like to propose is that we do it like a cliffhanger. And I would love to say that we'll do the third and fourth agreements when we come back.
Love that idea.
Love that.
Because this agreement also still has so much more
It really does.
and that we can explore, right? In terms of
Right.
taking things personally. And I think that's a great idea,
Oh
Kathy.
gosh, I hope you're not taking it personally that I jumped in there, Joanna.
I'm not taking it personally at all. So how about that? That sounds good to me. Just being comfortable with the word and not taking things personally.
I think it's going to be fantastic for everybody to kind of practice and keep us all accountable, right? Can we stop and ask for a moment, why is this triggering me, before we react?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am so glad to be here, and I hope you are too.
Thank you so much for teeing this conversation up, Joanna. I love the 4 agreements. It's by Don Miguel Ruiz. If you're not familiar with the book, he's shares Toltec wisdom. The Toltecs were an ancient society, kind of predated the Aztecs even, and they were very scientific and educational at the same time. And it's interesting because Don Miguel came from a line of mystics, if you will, and his family kind of expected that he'd be carrying on, but he decided to become a doctor. And what he recognized when he started going into the field is that we are not our bodies, and the problem wasn't with the physical aspect of our lives. It was really he calls it the psychology, but he came up with this beautiful framework. It's so simple, the 4 agreements, and it is so incredibly powerful. Interesting. Don Miguel says himself that even if you just took the very first agreement of being impeccable with your word, that one agreement is enough to change your life. So it's interesting because first 3 agreements he talks about of being in our own imagination. So you can see how using the words and taking things personally, those are things that we're thinking about other people. And the 3rd agreement is as well. So the 3rd agreement is about don't make assumptions. So this again is something that's happening in our mind. Our mind can have many different channels going on at the same time. And oftentimes we're making assumptions because we are afraid to ask what can be courageous questions to get clarity on what somebody else means. It's easier for us just to kind of slap a label on something or make an assumption about what somebody meant by what they said, or we make assumptions that I was good at this one when my poor husband. I just assumed that if he loved me, he would know what I wanted and what my preferences were and that kind of a thing. And we do that a lot in relationships with other people. So the invitation here is to not make assumptions, because it's when we do, we're kind of writing what we believe to be true. It's kind of funny because at the beginning of relationships, oftentimes we're making assumptions, kind of painting the picture. It's like the honeymoon phase. And so we're painting the picture of how wonderful this new potential mate is, and so everything is blue skies and whatever rainbows. So we're making assumptions in that way until something happens and our hopes are dashed, and then we begin to make those other stories. And what if all these stories are all assumptions? What if, rather than trying to change somebody, just recognize who they are and accept them for the way they are? So without making assumption about who they are, who they aren't, just trust. It allows us to live in the present of what's coming up and question, what's right for me? Where are they coming from? You can see how it's almost like these agreements build one upon the other, recognizing what the word is, that everybody has their own version of that, and then not taking that stuff personally when somebody flails their beliefs at you or their accusations at you. What if that is their storyline that's playing out for them? It really doesn't say anything about you. And then not to make assumptions about what those other people are saying or doing or coming from. So that's my summary. I'd love to hear if you guys have other things you'd like to chime in about how we assume things and really make, as they say, an ass out of you and me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I also think it's about the stories that we tell ourselves about what happened. There's the isness of what happened, and then there's a story that we make up around it. And we often don't pay attention to the distinction of that. And so also it can affect the memories that we have about something that happened, in the past. And we bring it into the present and we drag these beliefs, which is where our belief systems come from, right? Our assumptions come from our belief systems, and they get applied to every situation in our life and all the people in our lives. We bring that history in based on the assumptions that we've made and the faulty memories that we have.
They say 80% of our memories aren't even really true anyways. And I love, as you're describing it, it just feels so heavy, like we're dragging all this stuff along. It's like, no wonder we get to a point where we're not energized and excited about our life. It's because we're living almost, we've got half of our truth, half of our, like one foot in the past, all these old narratives, all these old grudges and blames and shames and frustrations. It's let it go, let it go.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
I love what you just said about letting go, because for me, this one is particularly tied to the first one, to the first agreement, because to me, it's about how willing are you to be honest with yourself and with the world? And how willing are you to reveal the truth of who you are? The good, the bad, the pretty, and the ugly. And you mentioned relationships, Kathy. So, a lot of times one of the biological things about relationships is that in that honeymoon period, right, or dopamine or serotonin or oxytocin, all those things are just making us want to look only at what is aligned, at what we have in common, at what we do like about the other person. And therefore, our perceptions get somewhat pinkish overtone of reality, right? We're looking at it through the rose-colored glasses, but then we begin to see more of the reality. And then the disappointment or the misunderstandings or all of these things come in and we make a big mess of it, right? All of that could be avoided if we could be really impeccable with our word. If we could just look and say, okay, this is what I mean. This is who I am. Am I willing to reveal myself? Am I willing to trust other human beings to accept me for who I am? And by not making those assumptions, when someone says something that maybe triggers something in me, or that something that I'm not sure I fully understand, or that I'm going to take personally, can I stop and feel that and notice it? And just that immediate emotional reaction, can I learn to use that as a big red sign that says, stop and ask, what did you mean by that? before I take it personally, before I go into expectation or disappointment or anger. I mean, we could avoid a lot of problems in the world if we could do this. And this is why it's huge. It's transformative. It's life-changing, because there's so many different layers in which we can apply these 4 agreements and how they affect every possible relationship, starting with a relationship with ourselves. Again, it's an invitation to me of, can I love myself more? Am I willing to reveal more of who I am, the truth of who I am, and see the truth of others without necessarily judging them, just observing, accepting.
Yeah. And just thinking of all the different stories that, we're buying into. We are given them, but we don't have to buy them anymore. So, it might have served us up until now, or maybe it didn't, but now we get the opportunity to make that choice. But certain little things, like, what does it mean to be beautiful? Or what does it mean to be successful? Or it matter that we matter, like the most important desires of our life. We're kind of bastardizing with these other things of like, it's got to look like this or that, and that's not true. So I just love how you said it's like our ability to love ourselves enough to take off that mask that we put on because we thought that that's what others, what we needed from what society needed from us, how we were expected to show up in order to be part of the clan. We don't want to lose that connection. So how many masks have we accumulated in all different areas of our life? The relationships, the loves, the money, all these aspects. If we can take those masks down and love yourself just the way you are. It's fun to, if you ever catch an interview with Don Miguel, he's just so animated and so in love with life. He's like, the only thing we got to do is love our life. Like, that's what God is, like the everything. It's the space between the reactive thoughts. It's like, yes, yes, yes. That is the invitation. That's the freedom. Catch yourself in between the spots and grab it.
Mhm.
Miss Joanna.
Yeah, I as I sit here and just listen to not making assumptions, the part of me that is still growing is asking myself when I am triggered, why does that trigger me? Because a lot of times we can immediately go to blame when we're triggered, but when something affects us, it's us. And learning that mastery is what I feel like the 4 agreements does for me, is giving me an overlook of, okay, what did I say that caused this? Or what did I say? Am I being impeccable with my word? But also, when something does come my way that may trigger me, may, have that effect on me, what am I assuming about this? Why am I getting triggered by this? So a lot of times, just taking that self-analyzation of who I am in this situation, a lot of times is what, if I could ask myself that, then I don't have to react. Because a lot of times we can react quicker than we could even ask ourselves a question. So I try to step back. I think that's the, with making assumptions, that's the greatest tool that I found for myself, is to sit back and ask, okay, why did that just trigger you? When you notice that feeling come, just that second to ask myself that question is now allowing me to review and figure out, okay, maybe you're making an assumption about what they said. Maybe you should ask them. And a lot of times it's the courage, because you don't want to really hear the answer. I always say that, don't ask questions you're not ready for the answers for. So we don't ask those questions. We rather make assumptions because we don't really want to hear the answers that'll come. So a lot of times it's really just to go within. Am I ready for the answer for this?
Mhm.
Is this the truth? It's a lot of self-evaluation when it comes to that assumptions thing. And it's pulling back, really, that second to ask yourself a self-reflecting question, I feel like has been the best tool that I've had for checking myself in that time, I would say.
You just said something that was really powerful for me, when you said, is this the truth? And that's so powerful because truth is different for everybody. When we stop to really look at it, there's, yes, as Carol calls it, the isness, the facts, the real, right? But so much of that is perception. Is it my truth? My truth may not be your truth. And so much of that truth can be my beliefs creating that truth. So we do get to question it. We get to question ours, everybody else's, and not take any of it for granted. But really, I like to think of it as a constant wonder of, who are you? What do you believe? How do I get to know you better? By asking those powerful questions. And what do you perceive as truth versus what I perceive as truth? Not make the other person wrong, not make yourself wrong either, but question constantly. I think it's powerful.
Yeah. Also, what was coming up for me was in this day of technology, we write emails to one another and we read things, and someone might send something that is quite direct or matter of fact, but the receiver takes it as something very abrupt and curt, and we make assumptions of what the person who wrote the email was meaning, the intent behind it, the tone behind it, because we're not face to face with one another. We can't see the tone, we can't see the facial expressions, whether they're smiling, whether they're having a dry comical moment. We can't tell any of those things, right? And we take things the wrong way, and then we shoot off a response that the person who wrote the original email says, whoa, what the hell? Where's this coming from? So and it gets snowballed, right? And something so simple as to, this is how I read the email, but I don't want to make any assumptions about what you actually were meaning or referring to, or the tone in which you were saying it. Or if you don't hear from someone for a while, we make an assumption sometimes that the person is ghosting us, or they're being disrespectful and not responding. And we don't know what's going on in anybody else's life, right? We have no clue. But yet we leap to the worst possible thought, instead of saying, hey, you know what? I hope this person's okay. I'm going to check in with them, see if they got what I, sent. Maybe I'll even call them. Wouldn't that be a novelty? If we have the phone number, of course. But so those are the other kinds of assumptions that we make a lot of times, and how things can snowball out of control.
I feel like most marriages are done because of assumptions. Just making all kind of assumptions in relationships. It's a really, just like you said, 80% of our subconscious is like made up. So how do we not assume something when, it's just so, I just find it, ooh, that's all.
The intention, I love all the concepts that you guys teed up, of just the invitation to take that moment to assess, like first at me, like, whoa, what was that why did it strike like that? And then what else is possible, instead of, going to the negative, because our brains, just knowing that our brain has a negativity bias, just what else could this be? Oh, it might be, the phone might have died because they're out, whatever, somewhere, that's why I'm not hearing from this person. But I think to recognize that we have within us that a defensive desire to be right or be important to somebody else, and just kind of check that at the door. Give yourself the grace of that moment to reflect and say, what else is possible? And hold that intention of like, I really want to be in the isness of this conversation. And what I really want is true communication, like conscious communication. I'm going to ask that question, a clarifying question. It's going to take courage to ask that in the face of this emotion that's welling up for me, and maybe that for them, maybe or maybe not, and create that two-way conversation, which allows, like Claudia, you were kind of saying, if somebody else has a different point of view, you can have grace with that too, with the desire to have a loving connection. So.
One of the things that I find so powerful, and I keep going back to some of this because it is so powerful. So when I was working with executives and C-suite, the easiest, I have a whole exercise on perception, on how we can use the exact same word and different people perceive it differently. So one of these kind of alarming statistics is that 79% of corporate mistakes happen because of miscommunication. And literally 69% of marriages end up in divorce. It's because lack of a communication. So that says to us, okay, wait a second, we're speaking the same language. So where is this not connecting? How are we not seeing each other, understanding each other, and being able to connect at a place where we actually understand each other? And a lot of that is we're not necessarily always being impeccable with a word. So mean what we say what we mean, stop and think, how is this word usage going to affect me and others? That's why for me, the number one is so important, right? And can this lead to a misunderstanding? Can I clarify? Can I find ways to show up as authentically as possible so that I kind of create as little misunderstanding as possible? And then I get to check my ego at the door too, because, a lot of times we want to be seen, we want to be understood, and we don't want to lose face and feel that we are wrong, right? So sometimes we defend things and we make assumptions because we believe that we know what we're talking about and don't want to turn around and say, what do you mean? Like, I'm not sure I'm following what you mean, right? So there's a lesson in humility in this. There's also a lesson in understanding, like we talked about, that conditioning, those beliefs that we've carried most of our lives, that we get to ask, are these still valid? Are these still true? Are they relevant anymore? Can I let this go now? Can I choose a different belief that supports me more? I wanted so much to be seen as a kid. I felt like I wanted to prove to the world that I could do it all. And now it's like, well, I like to try to do it all, but now it's from a different space, right? And I can also say, I don't know about that. I'd love for you to tell me.
And what a beautiful conversation that is, to have invite somebody in to that middle ground.
Show me your world. Tell me what you know. Share your perception. That to me leads to also a much greater, deeper connection where we actually get to see each other and get to know each other. Like I say, the good, the bad, the pretty, the ugly.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, like you said, once we bring down that mask of needing to prove, like Brene Brown has the quote about, we spend half of our lives like creating that need, and then the truth about who we think we need to be, and then we spend the rest of our time trying to prove that that's right. So take the mask off, and then it opens up this place for true connection and joy and love. Like if you loved yourself enough, invite others to have that connection and love. I think it's a beautiful thing. So I think let's dive into the last one. So it is always do your best. And it's interesting because the first three are all in the imagination, the stories that we're concocting within. And the last one is actually allows us to wrap up all three of those and to put it into action. So in always doing our best is to recognize that it's kind of, life is kind of like a river. So we're never going to be the same person. We're never going to be always up or always down. So your best is kind of a subjective on a day-to-day basis. What does doing your best look like? And again, you can kind of circle back and do, what if you were doing your best with being impeccable with your word, doing your best at, not making assumption. If you circled back and wrapped all these, but put them into action, creating rituals so that you're always showing up in alignment with that. That's the path to mastery, is always doing your best. It's kind of like not using external motivation as the way to do it. It's really an internal calibration of this desire for this freedom that comes when you're free of these masks that we've been talking about, and begin to set that intention to connect heart to heart and to live in joy and love and these things. It's a beautiful space. So.
Absolutely. With doing your best, it's, as you were just saying, what is my best today? And when I travel, I notice when I come back, I don't have the energy to do as much as I would normally do on a day. And I had to give myself grace and say, this is the best you can do today. Tomorrow's a new day. And being able to own that is like Claudia said, I'm used to doing everything I need to do, so when you have to sit back and say, this is it today. If it's getting up and taking a shower and going to lay back down, that's all I had enough energy for today. That was my best today. So I think that's huge with just understanding what your best is. It's not always that high energy, high flow, and it's not always that low energy, just having grace with whatever it is today.
Maybe your best is taking care of your body and getting an extra nap in after that travel.
Yeah,
It's a great example.
Mhm.
Yeah. And also, I've always talked about completing cycles of action. That's part of completing any given cycle, is knowing that you've done your best for now.
Mhm.
And also, when we're having conversations with people or doing anything, our moods fluctuate throughout any given moment and of a day. And in any given moment, we're doing the best we can, and to be able to be accepting of that. And also, sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. So in our communications with others and the things that we're trying to accomplish, we might not always have all the information at our fingertips that we could, but we don't know that. And so with whatever we've received and with whatever we have at our fingertips at that moment, we are doing the best we can with the information that we have.
Mhm.
And it's so important because when we punish ourselves looking back at, I should have done this, could have done that better. No, you really couldn't. Just accept that you did the best you could at that particular moment with what you had, with the information that you had, the knowledge that you had at that time. It's really that simple.
And that's really powerful, Carol, when we apply it to others as well. Meaning, I spent a lot of time blaming certain things in my life on choices my parents made for me, for example, and feeling that I didn't have those choices, right? And I wish they would have done it differently. But I've come to accept that ultimately they were doing the best they knew how, with the knowledge they had at the time, with the limitations and the freedoms and the education and the perceptions they had. So when we apply this to others as well, can we give ourselves and others that grace, that non-judgment for a moment? Can we forgive? Can we let go? Can we say, maybe they were doing the best they could with the knowledge they had at that time? Because hindsight's always 2020, right? And don't we wish we all could see the future? We'd have that crystal ball and we could channel constantly, but we're in a constant evolution and we're growing and we're learning new things, and we learn by trial and error. And that's the truth. We get to fall down 50,000 times before we get to learn to walk. And if we can apply that to ourselves as adults, as adolescents, as parents, as wives, as partners, as teachers, and say, wow, oh, okay, I just learned something new today that I can apply tomorrow or that I can apply later. But it's a constant evolution. And that, to me, that's the point of living, right? When we're done, if we stop learning, then what's the point? So it's ideally that constant point of evolution that will lead us to every day doing the best we can that day, and be graceful with ourselves and with others and say, okay, it was not as good as yesterday, but it was the best I could do today. And it might be better than tomorrow, or tomorrow might be better than today, without judgment, with just the ability to look within to do the best we can that day.
I love the sense of just like expansion that comes when you think about putting all that blame, the judgment, the, shame, frustration, like there's a
Take a load off.
oh, that's heavy, and truly when we're living with our foot half in that blame of the past, we're only living half in the present. So the invitation here is for us to become fully present at this moment now, at this day now. My best looks like this, and with no shame, no expectation above what we can do. It's not, that old conversation of when we were growing up, the need for perfection. It's like, that's so 2020, I always say, just like let that stuff go and live into this day now. But gosh, it truly is breathing into the words of these 4 agreements. There's so much transformation that's possible. It's just one of those books I read a couple times a year, and it's always something different for me.
I just want to touch on that perfection.
I'm not the only one.
That's always a good one.
Because they have learning that doing your best is not perfection. And that differentiation for me was huge, like, I just feel like that's something that a lot of people may go into, and they feel like doing their best is a form of, I got to be perfect at something. Doing your best is just the action of doing. The fact that I'm going to try this, whatever it may be for you, even if you attempt something and you may not actually succeed, you did your best. It's not the perfection of it. And I just feel like that's something that really needs to resound, because sometimes people feel like doing their best is being perfect, and it's far not the truth. So I just really wanted to just touch on that a little bit.
Thank you, Monica. That's so powerful. Go ahead, Carol. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, and that means that there are no real mistakes, because if we're here to learn, grow, and evolve, there's no mistake. We're just growing. We're learning every single step of the way. What works, what doesn't work, what's going to move us forward, and we just go from there. Even if we feel like we're not moving forward, a lot of times we are. We're just at the bottom rung of that next step.
The bottom rung, I like that.
Yeah.
There's so many levels to wrong. That's the bottom rung. I like,
But there's always a bottom of every step, right? You have the step, and when you're lifting, you either catch your foot at the tip of that step, or you lift it all the way up and you land on the step. There's that space in between, right?
I love the play on words. It's good.
I like that. Oh, boy. Yeah.
But it's really powerful how that search for perfection can be so limiting, right? And can really throw us off on the path. And it's not about that. And it's not about expecting that from ourselves or anybody else, for that matter. Just as we make mistakes, everybody around us does too. And maybe they didn't find the right word to express what they wanted to say, and they used something that triggered you or that hurt you, or that. How do we continuously find ways to set our intention to do our best, look to improve? That to me is all that's required. It's, am I willing to learn from the mistakes? Am I willing to find another way to possibly do it better? Am I willing to look at where I went cuckoo or wrong? And if there's no judgment, there's no wrong. It's just, can I find a better way? Can I find a way that supports me more, supports those around me more? It's not about making myself wrong either, or making others wrong either, but maybe we could say this more lovingly, more kindly, more authentically, more efficiently, so that we can find ways to continuously set our intentions to do our best. And look at, are those around us doing the same? And if not, can we invite them to? Without judgment, without attack. You know, it would really help me if you could find a way to clarify what you mean, so that we can, without going into assumptions about each other, find better ways to communicate. And it's a beautiful invitation also.
So I was going to say, it almost becomes like being willing to give somebody that benefit of the doubt, that grace, that invitation to, like, no, tell me what this is really about. That ability to, willingness to see from their point of view, their perspective, where they're coming from, to understand how they got there, who they are. Like, that to me is kind of the greatest invitation that we can be, and it allows other people to meet us in that space. And when we look at all the divisiveness that's been cultivated these last couple of years, I can't think of a better thing than we doing our best and to try to be impeccable with our word, and to invite people into that conversation with us.
I think it's also such a huge gift that we can give someone too. The greatest gift is to say, I see you. I hear you. I understand you. Even if I don't agree with you.
Right.
To me, that is one of the most beautiful gifts I think we could ever give each other.
And I just, with the, you're right, when you can grow with someone, because that's what it is, when somebody's willing to go to the hurt and maybe address it, or go through something and address, okay, I'm not going to have an assumption, I'm going to ask the question. That's a growing relationship. It really is, because you can have those that will make the assumption and will just keep it there. Like kind of Carol said, they'll have the email or the tone and they won't even question it. And those that say, listen, I found a little discrepancy in how you were talking to me, or just being able to say that is allowing both of you to grow. Because now I feel like that person, yeah, it may feel like they were offended, but they're allowing me to see where my faults or how I can hurt a person. So it allows me to grow and say, okay, Joanna, maybe next time when you're writing an email, watch the tone a little bit, or so when you have a person that's willing to go through and say, I had an assumption, or someone that's willing to confront the conflict, is really allowing both people to grow. It's a beautiful thing, because that's what's happening. You're allowing both of you to grow. And I think that's a better way to look at it than they're going to be offended by me or something like that. I think that's because that's what's happening. That's what's happening.
Mhm.
I think part of us becoming ourselves and giving ourselves the capability to be our best comes about through ritualizing some of this, or just clarifying. I love the intentions that we've shared of like creating a safe space, like a non-judgment space, so that people feel safe coming with their mask down to and do this. So yeah. Carol, how do you create this for yourself?
Well, what I do is I remember who the person is, you know, and even if I don't know them, I have learned the hard way not to make an assumption, to really honor the fact that they are operating with the best intentions. And I have no history or reason to believe that they're not. So why would I assume otherwise, right? And so that's where I come from. And it didn't always come from that place. It learned things the hard way, believe me. But I truly have learned those lessons. And then with the people that I do know, I just have to I remember who they actually are. You know, it's, if something's getting twisted in my brain, then I'm the twisted one,
That's what I love about you.
not them. And it's my responsibility to clarify it.
Right.
So that's how I deal with it all.
Absolutely.
It's liberated. It's almost like assume the best of somebody else. You know, if they said something, it's like, oh, they must be in a rush that it came across so brusque or whatever. It's like use that assumption to your benefit in a way. Like how you spun that.
Yeah.
Speechless, ladies. This is so powerful, though, because, you know, in the measure in which we start putting all of them together, starting with, to me, I still feel that the first one is that self look, that deep analysis, that creating consciousness. What am I saying? How am I saying it? Why am I saying it? Where's it coming from? And then being able to say, okay, let me not take anything personally, because why are they saying what they're saying? How are they saying it? Can I ask those clarifying questions? And then I can be impeccable by not assuming anything, but asking and clarifying every time. And therefore, if I am doing all of these things, I am setting that intention and that integrity of trying my best. And I love the way they connect. For me, this little book is something that I've been actually giving to executives and clients for like the last 18 years of my life. I've actually met Don Miguel Ruiz and his son, and we will probably talk about some of the other books, possibly The Fifth Agreement and possibly The Mastery of Love, which is another one of Don Miguel Ruiz's books, which is life-changing, and The Mastery of Self. So stay tuned, because we might end up bringing some of these things and sharing them with you. They're just fabulous books, and highly we recommend you take a look at them.
There's so much change that happens for people when they start following these agreements and making them with themselves. And it's not for anybody else but yourself. That's it. Do I want to be impeccable with my word? Yes. Do you want to take and make assumptions or take things personally? Nobody wants that. So, and then putting all of this in action, like you said, just with doing your best. Who says I don't want to do my best? So making these agreements with yourself, and just taking note every day. Am I being impeccable with my word? Did I take anything personally? Just going through this self-check every day, you can see change in your life. I promise. I promise with just that.
These are very, very powerful, life-changing things that develop consciousness, develop awareness, change energies, change relationships, change the way that you communicate with yourself and with others. So we highly recommend them. Take a look if you haven't read the 4 agreements before. This is one that you want to go pick up for yourself.
I love you, ladies. You're awesome. Such a beautiful conversation.
Yes,
it
I
has
thank
been.
you.
Love and light.